Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be doing a review for Adrian Tchaikovsky's Children of Time. Adrian Tchaikovsky is an author that has been on my radar lately, mostly because of all of the love that he has been getting from Alan. I know Alan really loved his book Guns at the Dawn and is now doing a channel read-along with his longer fantasy series. So I've been hearing a lot of praise for Adrian Tchaikovsky kind of peripherally on BookTube, and this is a book that I had been looking forward to reading for quite some time. So myself and a couple of friends on my Discord put together a buddy read and decided to all read it together starting on the very first day of November. So we had a small group of people that read the book together, and it was a really, really fun time. This book, if it's something that you have been thinking of reading, is a book that really facilitates a lot of great discussion. I had a better time reading it with a group than I think I would have had on my own because a lot happens and a lot of stuff that you really want to unpack with other people. There were tons of times when I thought, that's really cool, I need to talk about it, or that's really disgusting, I need to talk about it, or that is really out there, I need to talk about it. So having that dedicated group of people who were making their way through the book at relatively the same pace was really, really helpful. So I had a great time doing that, and thank you to everyone who decided to participate in that buddy read. Children of Time has been on my TBR for quite a while because it got a lot of really good buzz when it was released. A lot of people were talking about it. I don't really think I was on BookTube at that time, but just people that I'm friends with or through Goodreads, I saw a lot of praise for this book and I wanted to read it. So I picked it up at the end of last year. I actually gifted it to my husband for Christmas. And this year I put it on my 21 books to read in 2021 list, and then organizing this buddy read gave me the push that I needed to get through it before the end of the year. I personally just find I'm always really interested in reading sci-fi, but then when I have a bunch of things on my TBR, I'm so much more likely to pick up fantasy than I am science fiction. So I've been trying to make small changes to that this year. I've been integrating a little more science fiction into my overall reading, and it's been going well. And I am certainly very glad that I put this on the list. I really enjoyed it, and today I'm going to do a spoiler-free review and kind of highlight some things that I think would make this book appealing to different types of people. So if you are someone who has not yet read it, if you've been debating whether or not you would like to read it, then hopefully this video will be of some use to you. Just to give a very slight overview about what this book is about, this is a science fiction novel that takes place in the distant future for our planet. And it is told in a dual perspective. So kind of at the beginning of the novel, you have a scientist who, Dr. Kern is her name, and she has gone out into space, and she is part of a group of scientists who would like to give humankind or give sentient life a chance at other points in the universe. So she is, I'm not really sure if they say exactly what she is, if she's a geneticist or a biotechnologist or an evolutionary biologist, I'm not sure, but she is a scientist, and she has devised a method for jump-starting evolution. So she has created or helped to create a nanotechnology that she will then inject into a primate that will kind of speed up evolution and create a human-like or humanoid species that will evolve at a incredibly rapid rate. And it is her goal to kind of stay close to this population without direct interference. So there has been a previously terraformed planet that she is going to send these monkeys down onto, and then she's going to unleash this nanotechnology, which has been configured to not interact with other mammals so that it will kind of only affect these primates. And she is going to watch them and see how they evolve and whether or not they follow the same path as humans or if they follow a different path and how quickly they devise certain types of technology, etc. So this is kind of humankind's attempt at spreading sentience throughout the universe. And one of the reasons that they would like to do this is because the planet Earth is failing. Humankind is struggling. There's a lot of infighting between the faction of humanity that is pro kind of biotechnology, genetic manipulation, evolutionary biology, and then there's a faction on Earth who is very much anti spreading sentience throughout the universe and feels like that is the purview of God and that humanity has no business getting into that. So Kern is kind of a scientist through and through. She does not care for morality. She does not care for religious beliefs. She just cares about her experiment and seeing it through to success. So at the very beginning, and this is all like chapter 1 of the novel, at the very beginning, something goes wrong. And while the nanotechnology is spread to the planet, it has an unanticipated consequence. So for reasons that you will discover when you read the book, it is not able to, I guess, infect the intended host. And instead, a subgroup of living beings that the scientists hadn't really considered, which are the invertebrates, are influenced by this nanotechnology instead. So for the remainder of the book, we get this dual perspective between groups of humanity that are out in space. And I will allow you to find out the exact reasoning behind this and how that all comes to be. But there is a group of humanity, and then we follow a group of arachnids who have been infected by this nanotechnology. And you get this dual perspective where you flip-flop between the two groups over quite a long period of time and see how both of these groups change, evolve, adapt, and live in the world that they've been given. So really what I knew about this book before I went into it, and what I think everybody knows about it, is that it's kind of like humans versus spiders. I think that's the like one line pitch that everybody gets, but that is the general setup. And I was not entirely sure what to expect here, but I will say that I didn't realize that it was dual perspective. So I knew that it was kind of the story of humans versus spiders, but I think that I would have actually been a little bit more compelled to start earlier if I had known about that dual perspective, because I find when people do this well, it can actually really help the pacing of a novel, and it certainly does that here. Going back and forth between the human characters and the spider characters gives you a fresh perspective each time. You get to see the struggles from different sides of kind of that species barrier, and it keeps things really fresh. So it keeps the pace very quick. This is a very easy book to flip through. It takes no time to make it through a chapter, and then when you get to the next chapter, you're like, oh, well, now I'm back with the spiders, so I really need to figure out what happens. And then you kind of flip back to the humans. You're like, oh gosh, I need to get back to that other part. And so I thought that worked really well. It was fairly balanced. I think most of the people who read the story on the Discord felt like the spider chapters, to the great surprise of some people who are not even really that comfortable with spiders, I think they found those chapters even more compelling than the chapters of the humans. That will wax and wane. There are definitely parts of the human story that become a lot more intense, and then they will slow down. And then there are parts of the spider story that become a lot more intense and then slow down. But I think that Tchaikovsky does a great job of balancing those two perspectives and makes you really invested in both groups of these characters. So I thought that was phenomenally done, and it really made me respect Tchaikovsky's pacing and his writing style overall. The writing itself is not, so this is very straightforward writing. It is not kind of gorgeous lyrical prose, but it's also not awkward and clunky prose. I think it is very much just a window into the story. There is nothing that I found to be particularly distracting. I think that it fits the story quite well. And I think in the vein of a lot of science fiction, there's a lot of emphasis on biology and evolution and more of kind of the grand scope of the universe and much less about individual characters or individual stories. And his very solid, straightforward prose really supports that. If you're reading something that is scientific in nature, you don't expect it to be lyrical and filled with metaphor. You expect it to be functional and readable, which is what this is. This book is very readable, and the prose, I think, serves its function very well. Now, I don't want you to hear, oh, this is about evolution and biology and think like, oh gosh, this is going to be so boring. It's really not. Tchaikovsky makes this so fascinating. I was so interested. And I guess I have a little bit of bias because this is something, not the evolutionary lives of arachnids, I have not studied, but I have, my entire educational trajectory was mostly in the sciences. Or at least partially in the sciences. So this is something that I find really fascinating at baseline. And I think that Tchaikovsky does a great job of blending the possibilities of science with the societal ideas and anthropological concerns of humanity. I didn't look this up, which I really should have, but someone told me that Adrian Tchaikovsky is an anthropologist, and I would believe that. I'm going to double check and kind of like pop it up to confirm, but if not, then he definitely thinks like an anthropologist. So much of this book is an exploration of history and how our history defines us. It is about, we're looking at these species through the lens of evolution, but it's really about how we build societies, how we come together as people or as species, how our biology influences what we are able to accomplish, and how our accomplishments kind of spark other parts of our evolution, and how biology is not everything, how your instincts and your the traits that are inherent in your species, how you can rise above those or push them aside. The gender politics of spiders is not something that I would ever thought I would say out loud, or ever something that I thought that I would read about, but that definitely makes up a portion of this book. There is a significant amount of time dedicated to figuring out or getting to watch in on how these spiders evolve and how they build a society. And there's a lot of really neat parallels to human society. And if you are someone who enjoys history and you have followed the eras of humanity and how things like technology, how things like the printing press, how things like global expansion, how things like various cultures coming together, how those have influenced humanity and influenced different movements, like movements for humanity, like the feminist movement and the suffragist movement. If you want to see those kind of flipped on their head and explored in under an entirely different lens, into an entirely different scope, then this would definitely be the book for you. It is fascinating. There are things that socially Adrian Tchaikovsky explores with these characters that I would have never expected to be explored in a work of science fiction. Even though a lot of science fiction is a focus on how technology influences humanity and how it guides us and how it changes us, there are just things that are done in this book that I was never expecting to read in my life, and I really liked it. They were surprises, but they were very positive surprises. So that was very much enjoyable for me. And I guess aside from that kind of societal reflection and seeing how species grow and how they change and how your biology versus your morality reflects who you are and who you are going to become, there's also just a lot of really cool exploration of technology, and there's a lot of really cool scientific stuff that is totally above my head, but I had a great time reading it. It's very difficult to go into without spoilers, but there are some parts of this story and there are some techniques that are used that I have not read about in science fiction before. I am not incredibly well read in science fiction, so that doesn't mean that they don't exist, but they were certainly surprising to me, and a very positive surprise at that. Outside of that thematic exploration, there is some character development. There are some characters that you follow throughout the story, but because this takes place over such a large chunk of time, there are kind of generations of characters that you follow. So this is very much a generational story as opposed to an individual story. It is less of an intimate tale in that way and more of kind of a global story. But there were some characters who in one capacity or another you did follow throughout the story, or at least their history or their legacy had an impact on the story and how it was going to be carried out. So that is probably where it was the biggest struggle for me, because I really like those intimate character stories. I really love having a character or a handful of characters that I can attach myself to, that I am really invested in, who I want to see succeed, who I want to cry with when they fail. So that's the kind of thing that will elevate a book to kind of all-time top tier favorite book for me. And that's probably the part of Children of Time that kept it from being an all-time favorite for me. But regardless, outside of the fact that it doesn't have my very favorite thing about stories in general, I still loved it, which I think really speaks to how well done the rest of the novel is. If there are not characters that I can really attach myself to, then the themes need to be really strong, the execution needs to be done really well, the pacing needs to be excellent, and just the imagination and storytelling need to be something that I can connect to. And I can wholeheartedly say that Tchaikovsky's imagination has blown me away. I thought that this was such a compelling story. I could not stop reading. And like I said, it gives you a lot of food for thought, and there's a lot of really interesting stuff to discuss here. So overall, I thought this was a really great book. Like I said, recommend that you read it with friends or just discuss it with someone who has already read it. But in terms of kind of a global rating, this definitely got a 4.5 out of 5 stars from me. I would say that it was probably a 4-star book throughout the majority of the novel because I didn't have that kind of character love to focus on. And that's something that really pulls me through stories. But the last 100 pages of this book and the ending specifically were phenomenal. I thought I knew at multiple times throughout this book what was going to happen, what the resolution was going to be, who I was rooting for, what I was rooting for, and because of Tchaikovsky's deft storytelling, I was flip-flopping. Like, there were times when I was very pro one side of this, and then there were times when I went back over to the other side. There were things that I wanted to happen that didn't and broke my heart. There were things that I didn't want to happen that did, and I was just, my mind was kind of bouncing all over the place because I think that this is kind of a mind-breaking book. There are so many interesting things that are happening that it's really difficult to guess how things are going to resolve or be sure of what Tchaikovsky is doing. Up to, the very end of the novel, I was still furiously trying to figure things out. And even though you may have hints of where things are going to go, I think that at least for most people, this is going to be a very satisfying ending. It is going to be a very enjoyable story. Certainly we were a small sample size on the Discord, but I think most people really enjoyed this book. There are a couple people who are desperate to go on and read the second one. I believe there's only 2. I think this is a duology. I think that the ending is very satisfactory. I do not think that you need to go on. If you really enjoy it and you love Tchaikovsky's style, then I'm sure you will want to go on. I'm really interested to see what he is going to kind of pull out of thin air next. I haven't heard as much about the second book, Children of Ruin, and I don't know if that's because it was not as good as Children of Time, but if you have read Children of Ruin and you have a recommendation one way or the other, then I would definitely love to hear it. I plan on reading it, but because this was such a good ending, I don't feel like I necessarily need to rush out and read it right away. This had a very contained ending, but in the vein of lots of great sci-fi, leaves many ideas and places to explore. So I think that it was an excellent novel in that it's very self-contained, but also gives you the option to continue on if you would like to. So if you have read Children of Time and you enjoyed it or didn't enjoy it, then please let me know. I would love to hear from anyone. And thanks again to everybody who read it along with me. I had a fantastic time, and I will see you with another video soon.